What is up, dudes? Welcome back. Today we have another serial about fixing text trees. Today we have TDs, but before we're gonna go into the video, I have to point out a few things that's very important for you guys to know. This is not the first part. It's gonna be another part also, or 3 parts for this video, because it's gonna be a long one. We have 4 more tanks at tier 10 that I've added. A lot of tanks from tier 2 to 10 I've made it. Some of these tanks that we have in the game have been put it down a tier or 2 down from the known tier in the game in Armored Warfare. Some of the tanks that I'm pointing out in this video and in these videos are also found in other games, and I'm not pointing out, but some of you may know these tanks. Most of the tanks that are in the game are AFVs, not tank destroyers such as BMPT 2000, Ramka, Terminator, and so on. They are not tank destroyers. Those are IFVs or AFV, and even anti-aircraft tanks, because they have a turret that can turn up 45 degrees up, you know, vertically. To start the video, we're gonna go straight to the text tree itself. I'm just gonna point out some TD, just gonna say to you guys can see. So we have some TDs here in this area, some of them here, which are very important. Keep in mind, this chassis of Swingfire or M113 aircraft, it's a very important chassis. Even nowadays it's being used, so keep in mind this, do not forget. And as a plus, I've added to this line of TDs a new set of AFVs, are much stronger, much more developed, very high tech, and you can play with them very aggressive. So it's a text tree especially for the Oscar Faraday of TD lines. Very special tanks that only a few players in this game knows to play with them, or at least with this type of tanks, because they're similar with some premium tanks that we have them at 7, 8, 9 and probably in the future at tier 10. Other TDs, let's have a look. We have here another TD. Let's go down a bit. We have here also TD like Mephisto, and we have here in Oscar Faraday a few tanks TDs, and the infamous M48 GAU-8 and MGM-1666. So here is the image. So as you see, there are plenty of tanks on the screen that's been hidden, because I have to make a very important decision. I had to make a lot of decisions in order to place each tank accordingly in order to make sense. And even some of the tanks that are not, but they exist, they can be placed as premiums. But I've made this text tree for the progressive tanks, and I'm gonna point out also some mistakes that have been made, well, unintended. But if some tanks weren't placed as premiums, it was a very great thing to be, you know, like some premium tanks, they do not deserve to be premium, and some tanks do not deserve to be tier 10 for a matter of reasons. So we will start right now. As you may see, the first line, it's gonna be the one that I spoke about, the AV line, which is gonna be an Oscar Faraday text tree line. But this text tree line, it's gonna be interesting because it's gonna hit other text trees as Francine de la Roche, or even the Sophie Wolfley or Marashishkin, and even if it might be, I don't know, perhaps a new text tree in the new feature. The first tank that we have, it is the Type 63. Basically is a T-34-76 converted into an anti-aircraft vehicle with Chinese twin 37mm Type 61 AA guns, but none of the original Type 63 survive today. Tier 3, ZSD-63 was the Chinese invention that was initiated in the 1958 and with a prototype finished in 1960. It was also sometimes called the Type 63, but it's different from the previous one, as you may see, with the chassis and the gun itself. The protection that the crew may have when they're shooting with that tank is a much better tank. Tier 4 is the M42 with a 40mm self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, or TASTAR, from USA. Was built for the United States Army from the 1952 until December 1960, and it served until 1988. This is a variant of the M41 Bulldog or something like this, but it's a much better, like, versatile vehicle. It has good traction, mobility, stealthy, you know, and some really good guns. BTR-ZD or Skrezhet. ZD stands for zenitnaya ustanovka. Is the tier 5. The BTR-ZD is an airborne armored personnel carrier which carries 2 teams with a man-portable air defense missiles. This vehicle is typically used in combination with the ZU-23-2 towed anti-aircraft gun mounted on top of the roof. And basically this is the tank that we have. This This is the ZU-23-2. It's similar with the BMD-1 and BMD-2, BMD-1 Puma or BMP-1 Puma, and it's also quite suitable to tier 5, so we can make, let's say, a mirroring of the AV lines in the Marashishkin tech tree or other tech trees where the BMD it is. At tier 6, I will put a tank that's gonna be very controversial for all of you, and many people will probably dislike this video, probably some people will like this video. Well, you have to sit and think about it as the tank's technology, capabilities, armor, gun, and when it's being put into production, it's being used, and how many pluses and minuses it had. T-249 Vigilante. The tank was a prototype with a 37mm self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, SPAG, designed as a replacement for the Bofors 40mm gun M42 Duster in USA Army service. This is a version of the Tier 4, much more improved with a different chassis. The system consisted of a 37mm T256 barrel Gatling gun, mounted on a lengthened M113 armored personal carrier platform, and just the length, but also it's being cut in half, like nearly half the tank is being cut. It's freaking OP just because of the stats that are in the game, but the tank can be also debuffed and used as a tier 6. Tier 7 is the 2S38 Derivatia PVO. It was designed as a concept or technology demonstrator. It could be a possible replacement for the TS6 2S6 Tunguska air defense gun missile system that was adopted back in the early 1980s. By 2020, a couple of units of the new system were completed. This is a BMP-2 on steroids. This is the tier 7 AFV that we have in the game, or the tier 6. It's an upgraded version, much better, much more armor, a much better gun. Abilities can be added to this tank. Infantry can be added, can do a lot of damage. And just imagine to have a high alpha damage per shot as an AFV, so it may be a really good tier 7. Plus, his new technology, we can put him at tier 7, and our many counterparts of this tank, they can be added as a premium. The tier 8 is gonna be very, well, some of you will say all those nice words with F and WTF, because 1, the tank never existed, it was a model, a mock-up, so no traces of the tank in real life, and never saw production. 2, the gun that it has is too freaking huge for the tank. It's freaking huge, consumes a lot, and it's very, well, at long ranges it's imprecise, but in close ranges, yeah, it's a monster. And I put it, the GAU, the M48 GAU 8 at tier 8. The tank never existed, and we have him in the game at tier 10 without even a trace of, let's say, real thing, about the real thing. We don't have, and I don't think that deserves to be a tier 10. In my opinion, it does not deserve to be a tier 10. So he is at tier 8. The next tank, probably some of you may saw it as at exhibitions in Germany, probably in other places in movies and so on. The Flak Panzer. I hope I didn't butcher that name. It's kind of long and it's German. Gepard, better known as the Flak Panzer Gepard, I put him at tier 9 in my opinion. It's because of the chassis, the armament. The tank is much newer than GAU, and it has a very interesting type of, let's say, upgrades. It was developed in the 1960s and fielded in the 1970s and has been upgraded several times with the latest electronics. A variant of the tank is the one with Mantis gun system and the LFK NG missile based on the GTK Boxer, and that thing was also considered. So it's also a variant of this tank with ATGMs and missiles. This might be a 10 times Shilka probably, or 9 times Shilka, because at tier 10 we have the PGZ-09. It is the tier 10. It is armed with 2 35mm cannons and optionally 2 fire and forged infrared homing missiles. It is started to gradually replace the predecessor Type 95 in 2009. Some military analysts designed the vehicle as Type 07, but the official designation was confirmed as Type 09. The tank looks sick. It's much better than the previous tanks, Yeah, I think it deserved because it's one of the newest tanks by power and let's say abilities, and it's much better than even GAU, fairly at the same level as the Gepard. Yeah, I put him at tier 10 just because of the specs and of the technology that it possesses nowadays. This was the part 1, guys. See you in part 2 where we're gonna speak about the second line. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me in the comment section what you think about this lineup. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and see you in the next episode.